Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to talk about The Wizard and Glass by Stephen King, the fourth book in the Dark Tower series. So as always, we're going to talk a couple non-spoilery thoughts and opinions up front, then we're going to jump right over to spoilers because we're getting further into the series, and as we go along, I'm going to just kind of skip over the non-spoilery parts. So yeah, as always, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and let's begin. So, The Wizard and Glass. Clearly, the title is a reference to The Wizard of Oz, but it's interesting how the story it's kind of a, I don't know, it's a bit of a sandwich in a lot of ways, because the story really is a continuation of everything that we've been seeing our content go through over the last few books, but it's also kind of a prequel story sandwiched in the middle of everything else that we're doing. And to me, that kind of detracts from the pacing of the story. I really enjoy Jake and Susanna and Eddie and like I really enjoy that quartet. I really enjoy them as a unit. I am not very interested in Roland's past. Like I feel like I understood who he is from the Gunslinger. I feel like I get a very clear picture of who this man is and all his interaction with everyone else. So to just kind of crack open the safe and go into the past for a very long time kind of kills the pacing of the story for me. So this book overall is pretty interesting. I like it. Some interesting stuff happens. We learn some more stuff, and world building gets expanded and stuff. And of course, King's writing continues to be awesome. It's a really interesting type of. It's a really interesting difference in this story, I think, compared to a lot of his stuff, because there is quite a bit of a romance angle in this one. It's very much a love story, so it's very different than a lot of stuff that King writes. And King, in my opinion, is not very good at love stories, but this one has got to be one of his better ones, because you feel the emotions for the characters, you feel the their chemistry and stuff like that. All that stuff kind of works. But for me, the biggest detraction is the fact that there is almost no stakes, because we know exactly how the flashback story ends before we get into it. So there's no real stakes to it. So it kind of falls flat for me, and as a result, it takes away time from the stuff that's going on in present day. So it just kind of creates this pacing mess, in my opinion. So I want to go into more detail about that kind of stuff and talk about the stuff that I really like, which I can just say in a nutshell is I really like the stuff before we get into the flashback, and I like the stuff after the flashback, because it opens up a whole world of, actually a whole multiverse of interesting ideas and concepts, and it's pretty much starting the groundwork for the major stuff that we'll see in the later half of the series. So I really dig that stuff. So let's go ahead and jump into spoilers, because as always, it really does go without saying, the writing is good. The writing is going to be good, but King is at this point, especially back in the day, King's writing is like a taste kind of thing. Like if he's not your taste, you're not going to like anything that he does. So if you like especially 80s era King, that kind of thing, 80s to like late 90s or whatever era, because his writing styles of course changed over the decades. If you really like that era of him, then this one really gets you. So this story to me reads a lot like 1980s to like mid 90s King, kind of like Salem's Lot kind of stuff a little bit. Like it's an interesting story and it plays out kind of well, but as I said, the pacing of it it detracts it for me. It kind of hamstrings the story a lot. So I want to go ahead and jump over into spoilers so I can talk in a little bit more detail. So, spoiler warning for Wizard and Glass by Stephen King. So, the flashback story is actually just the story of Roland's first love. Like, he's talking about Susan Delgado and how they got together, how she was basically going to be the mistress of someone else, and like they end up crossing paths and like all this kind of, basically the whole thing is a tragic love story, because they end up together, like they love each other and they sleep together and stuff, and they're going on these kind of adventures to like be together, help each other in various situations and stuff. But ultimately we know that Susan dies. So when it comes up to that point, to me, like there's no real tension. The coolest thing about the flashbacks is that we get a little bit more information about like the world that Roland is from. Like we get to actually sit in that world quite a lot. Like we understand the barony that he's from, like with Gilead and stuff, and going west, and like the trials of manhood that they have, and like just all these other kinds of little things that really I think would work if we had like a true I mean, I guess that might. I mean, I don't know. There's this I can't remember the name of it, but there's this epic fantasy story that King wrote that really seems to just take place like in the like when Roland was younger. Like it's just kind of seemed to take place there. Um, I'm not sure if that is the prequel, but a lot of this information kind of feels like it would have made more sense to be a Roland prequel or side story or something like that. That is just a story that's purely about him and not cutting into our Dark Tower journey. Because that's my biggest issue with it. It just kind of smack dab cuts in the middle of the story, and it just kind of drags the pacing and drag all the interest to something else. So the story starts off where we basically left off. Our quartet is on Blaine the Mono, and they've been challenged to this major riddle duel. And Blaine basically says, if you can't beat me at riddles, I'm killing all of us. Because as an AI, he's been working for thousands of years at this point, and is ready to just end it all, I guess, because he's that level of advanced AI. But that entire situation, going back and forth with the riddles and stuff, different little ideas that they were coming up with, and realizations they were having while they were doing the riddle stuff, because there's some interesting bits in there where they kind of start to realize that they are vaguely telepathic with each other because they are quartet. They kind of can share thoughts and things like that. So there's a lot of that starting to happen and stuff, and there's just like a lot of interesting interactions, and like there's even more character depth and stuff being pulled out because there's a lot of internal monologue while they're thinking about these riddles and stuff. So I just really like that whole entire part. Like I really like the entire first part of the book. We get this perfect like cohesive nature of the content. Like they started to bond even more because Roland, who hated Eddie's dirty limericks and like dirty jokes and bad riddles and stuff like that, Roland really hated it. Like that ends up saving them. So like Roland then comes to understand like maybe there is a benefit to these kind of crude jokes and things like that. So he sees Eddie in like a different light and stuff. And it just kind of like that, all of that kind of stuff is just so good. I just love the interactions with these characters together. So the fact that I was enjoying that so much, and then we get pulled over to something else, kind of, you can probably understand why that took me out of it so much, because I was enjoying them together so much. So after Eddie uses these like illogical riddles and these like dirty jokes and stuff that don't have any proper answers to them, he basically locks Blaine into a logic trap and does, like how a lot of AI or robots get defeated in fiction. So it's like does not compute, and basically screws up, and more or less lets them off. Like it seems like there's some sort of accident, but they get off perfectly fine, and they just kind of start walking again, following the path of the beam. And one of the coolest things happen. They just kind of, as they're walking, they slip through a thinny, which is just basically the borders between universes have thinned out so much because of the damage to the Dark Tower that they can walk from one universe to the other, barely recognizing that they've shifted, only because there's like this humming and there's this sound indicator. So they realized that they were going through the thinny, but it's like just so easy. It's like the easiest multiversal traversal ever. So I think it's really cool that they end up in the world of The Stand. So another one of King's books, one of his most famous books, they end up basically walking through. They're on a highway, walking in the same distance towards the. They're walking on the path of the beam towards the Dark Tower, and basically as they keep going, they start to recognize all these vehicles and stuff like okay, so that's the same, but it's a different year from the when Eddie's from or where Jake is from and stuff. And then they kind of recognize these cars that are just like they've never heard of, never seen before, because they don't exist in their universe. And they see like old newspaper and stuff, and they're reading the newspaper and stuff, and there's just all this kind of stuff. So some of this is like, this would be the past for Eddie, because I think he's from the 80s. Jake is from the 70s, and Susanna is from the 60s. So to them, they're starting to freak out, thinking, oh, this could happen. This could be in our future. But Eddie's like, no, this didn't happen. So, like, it's a really interesting dynamic because they're all from 3 different universes, but the same planet and the same city and stuff. So it opens up all of this fun world-building stuff that's just so much fun, so delicious, and just so interesting. And I just really wanted to keep going with that. But we basically immediately after that conversation and stuff, we sit down and Roland starts to tell them the story of Susan Delgado, which is basically the rest of the book. So it kind of just, we went through all this fun stuff that I was really enjoying, and then the pace just completely halts, and we go to this story that has absolutely no stakes. I was like, ah, that super sucks. But one of the things that happened during that flashback, we get introduced to the wizard glass. So there are basically 9 orbs that are more or less, I don't know, my assumption is that they're like made of the same magical universal construct or whatever that the tower is, because they're like all glass balls. They're basically specified crystal balls to a degree. There's one that Rena, the main bad lady in the flashbacks, who ultimately end up getting Susan killed, she has one that's like the grapefruit, like the Dark One's grapefruit or something like that. And it has like a long sight thing with a little bit of telepathy. It's like all of them have different specialties. Each one of the orbs have different specialties, and I think there are like 7 of them, or no, maybe there's 12, because the black one is black 13. So there's got to be like 12 of them, and don't ask me to name the colors or anything, but they all have different specialties and different kind of abilities and stuff. And so we kind of get introduced to this different aspect of the world building. So it's something that definitely has major ramifications to the rest of the series. But it's like we had to go through this whole detour in order to get it. So I don't know. I'm trying not to just purely complain, but I kind of am just complaining about the backstory part because I didn't really care for it. I found it boring. I didn't really think anything too interesting happened. Yes, I did see some parallels between Roland's original quartet and his new quartet, which is kind of interesting. There's some cool parallels between like Cuthbert, that guy, and Eddie and stuff like that. So there's a lot of fun little stuff in there, but I really didn't care for it. Honestly, I think this has to be my least favorite book of the Dark Tower series, despite the fact that it has like some of my favorite parts in it. And it just kind of, it sucks. But this being my reread, I know what comes up next. So this kind of setup that we get that leads them to this next city, I get it. It just, I don't know. To me, I think it all just comes off as the fact that the series is a little neat in the way it's constructed. So that part that I'm like impressed by is really just King cleaning house nicely or something. So ultimately, I did enjoy the story, primarily the parts where we're still in the future. I mean, it's still in present day and stuff. And this is also, I believe, the first time we get mention of the Crimson King. Like, he's one of the big bigs, one of the big bads of the Dark Tower multiverse and everything. So it's interesting to get a kind of, name drops here and there for him and, like, who he is and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of cool. And we get to see Randall Flagg again, who is Walter, who is the man in black, who is the the big magic user King uses a lot. And a lot of his stuff, this guy has so many names. Yeah, so I don't know. Ultimately, I guess I'm just going to end it by saying I really did enjoy this book. As I said probably too many times by now, I enjoyed the beginning and I enjoyed the end a lot more. And I like the expansion of the world building and some of the different things that we get introduced in this book. But the major down vote for this book is the flashback. I didn't care for it. I didn't care for the romance storyline. It didn't pan out that well, and it wasn't that interesting to me. So, yeah, I guess that's my opinion on The Wizard in Glass. So, yeah, let me know what you thought about it in the comments down below. Are you all reading the Dark Tower series, or have you read it previously? Was this one of your favorites or least favorites with the flashbacks and stuff? Let me know about that in the comments down below. So, as always, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and I will talk to y'all next time. Peace.